Good morning. This is Pastor Jeff. It is August 7th, 2022. It's Sunday morning. I'm in my office in between the two services, and I am going to be preaching the sermon that I preached at church today. Proper 14. The sermon text is the Gospel of Luke, chapter 12, verses 32 through 40. We are coming to the close of chapter 12, and we are well on our way in this travel narrative. Yes, there is still a very long journey ahead of us, but we are 3 chapters in, and we have experienced a lot. In the travel narrative, Jesus coins many popular phrases. Now, at this time, it was him simply teaching his disciples and those following. However, over the centuries, individuals have picked out the phrases and put them in books and even made them into bumper stickers and have slapped them on their cars. One of those statements kicks off the 9 verses that we read today. Do not fear. This is one of those instances where the lectionary does not give us a full picture of what is happening in the full context of their travels. The words do not fear make more sense when you read it in connection with the previous verses. Do not fear is verse 32. So allow me to read the previous 3 verses and verse 32 together, and I think that it will not only make more sense, but it will set the stage for our full text that was given to us today. Here we go. Listen in to these very important words via the message. What I'm trying to do here is to get you to relax, not to be so preoccupied with getting so you can respond to God's giving. People who don't know God and the way he works fuss over these things, but you know both God and how he works. Steep yourself into God reality, God initiative, God provisions. You'll find all your everyday human concerns will be met. Don't be afraid of missing out. You're my dearest friend. The Father wants to give you the very kingdom itself. Now, if you're familiar with the full context, Jesus has just finished pointing to the skies and the fields. He was sharing that if God cares for the ravens in the sky and the lilies in the field, God most certainly will take care of you. God's faithfulness extends to all of creation. If we allow them, these words will continue to impress, inspire, uphold, and matter to us. Now, here is where the passage can overwhelm us. There is quite a bit of action that is packed in those next 8 verses. In my studies, there was a pattern that kept coming to the forefront. And the pattern is the following: fear, treasure, be prepared. I believe that there's a reason or meaning behind the order as well. This specific order can help us realize what a life of faith may look like for us today. Fear is where it starts. Jesus wants his disciples to release their fear. With the fear being released, you can now replace that fear with the promise of God's kingdom. The promises of God's kingdom is what brings us our treasures, and more importantly, gives us the understanding that the treasures are not necessarily earthly ones. Caroline Lewis says that if we led with treasures, we might lean heavily into the 3 A's. Her 3 A's are achievement, acquisition, and assets. If we are honest with ourselves, we see those 3 A's quite frequently in our culture today. She continues with 2 more alliterations. One is with the letter P, and the other is with the word self. She states that when the lack of fear precedes our fear-driven desires for possessions, purchases, procurements, we might actually be able to imagine treasures beyond self-driven determination, self-assessed success, and self-obsessed security. I sat with that sentence for a bit this week, and it really was powerful. And I'm still wrestling with how it can help me make changes in the way that I think and live out my faith. With fear and treasures being in place, we are able to meditate on what it means to being prepared. This can be difficult for us. I mean, it's been 2,000 years, and yet we still wait. I think that it would benefit us greatly if we shift away from time. Instead of thinking of it as an actual time, can we move our thinking into being imaginative about the activities that Jesus is doing in the world? Then can we take another step and see where God is working, where we least expect God to be working? As they were traveling, I think Jesus was sharing with them that waiting is simply not going to cut it. I think that is extremely true for us today. I think that we wait too much. Going back to what we started with, fear, treasure, being prepared, let's lean back into Caroline when she says, being without fear, knowing the source of your treasure, is what makes it possible to be prepared. And with that, we can be an actual participant in God's kingdom. Participation in God's kingdom includes both what happens inside these walls and what happens outside the walls. Yes, we as a church should be doing ministry outside of the walls, but remember, the church is all of us. So each one of us can and does participate in the community. Over the last few weeks, and in the upcoming weeks, we have been trying to shine some light on those areas, and we will continue to do so. For example, a few weeks ago, the service board asked a question about where do you serve or participate in volunteer work in Door County? We had 33 organizations that were lifted up. We can celebrate those areas of service. The Mission Board on Service will be highlighting some of those organizations in the near future, so keep your eye on that. Then we highlighted our mission boards. Once again, we have 10 boards that you could serve on. The list of the boards and their very brief highlight statement is on the pamphlet, and the pamphlet is on the back table. Then we have a one-sheet ministry description for each board if you want to see exactly what their responsibilities are and if you want to take a look at before joining. Last week, the Mission Board on Stewardship met, and in our conversation, we did talk about treasures, money, but we also talked about time and talent. In the near future, you are going to see opportunities on how you can use your time and talent. The board and individuals in the church have shared that they were unaware of all the ways to connect with one another and the church community and the possibility of jumping in on a one-time service project. Hopefully, this will be a useful tool that can help you live out the baptismal promise that states that we will serve all people, following the example of Jesus. With me sharing with you about the Mission Board of Stewardship, let me lean into verse 33 as I try to wrap up the sermon. Here is verse 33. Be generous. Give to the poor. Get yourself a bank that can't go bankrupt. A bank in heaven, far from bank robbers, safe from embezzlers, a bank that you can bank on. It's obvious, isn't it? In the NRSV, the language is giving alms. Almsgiving is not necessarily about trying to eliminate poverty. Instead, it is focusing on lifting up generosity as a mark of Christian life. Jesus is sharing with us that it is our faith that allows and promotes generosity. Speaking of generosity, our God is beyond generous, and our lives are anchored in the gospel promise that God's good pleasure is to give us the kingdom. It is scary times. Many of us are afraid. There is uncertainty all around us. We can rest in God's promises. May I close with a quote from Nelson Mandela. In 1994, he was giving his opening speech as the first democratically elected state president of South Africa. And this is what he said. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us the most. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and famous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. You playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightening about shrinking so that people won't feel insecure around you. We were born to make the manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it's in all of us. And when we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our present automatically liberates others. Friends, may we have the courage to release our fear. Amen.